From Music for All and presented by Yamaha, it's Mind the Gap, a practical podcast series for young and future music educators. Tonight on the program, Director of Bands at the Woodlands High School in Texas, Joni Perez, Music for All educational consultant and Bands of America Chief Judge, Richard Saucedo, band directors at Murray High School in Kentucky, Tim Zeiss and Beth Stribling. Our conversation moderated by Susan Smith and David Starnes. Please welcome Susan Smith and David Starnes.
Good evening, everyone. It's November the 30th, 2021. We're in season 2 of Mind the Gap. This is episode 4, and tonight's episode is entitled Competition is Value Beyond a Tenth. My name is David Starnes. I serve as the Director of Orchestras at Kennesaw Mountain High School in the Cobb County School District, and I'm a Music for All education consultant as well as a Bands of America judge. It's my pleasure to introduce my cohort this evening and my sidekick here on the podcast and webinar. Please welcome Susan Smith.
Good evening, everyone. Hey, David. Here we are again. I like doing these together again, as opposed to being separate.
Absolutely.
My name's Susan Smith, and I'm an educational consultant as well for Music for All and a lecturer in music education at Troy University. And I'm also chair of the NAFME Collegiate Advisory Council. I've taught at all levels, and I'm very interested in supporting young educators, as both of my daughters are in their 3rd and 5th year of teaching. David and I have had a great time during the pandemic doing these webinars to support young teachers and those who are in student teaching and kind of helping with that gap that we saw happen during that time. And we're so thrilled tonight with the topic, as everyone's just kind of wrapping up their competitive season. We wanted to talk to some people who have just been in the middle of it and find out some of the why of what they do and how they do it and how it works for their own programs. So we're just going to go around the table and ask everybody to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about themselves and where they're from. We'll start with Joni Perez from the Woodlands. Welcome, Joni.
Thank you. Glad to be here. My name is Joni Perez, and I'm the head director at the Woodlands High School in Houston, Texas. It's actually the only job I've ever had. I started there in 2005, and this is my 17th year as a director, and I became the head band director in 2010, and have a program of anywhere between 300 and 315 given the year. And yeah, just ready to contribute tonight and learn from some other people. So glad to be here.
Fantastic. As well, many of you might know him as a composer. We know he wears a lot of hats, and we know him as a friend. We're happy to have Richard Saucedo with us tonight. Richard, tell us about yourself.
Thanks so much, David and Susan. It's great to be on here with all these wonderful educators. I was former director of bands and department chairman at Carmel High School in Carmel, Indiana for 30 years. And now I'm an education consultant for Music for All, and also get a chance to be chief judge for Bands of America. So that's been a lot of fun, and something I'm continuing to look forward to. We just finished, as you guys know, Grand Nationals. It was just amazing. We have some of the instructors from those bands that were just so great this year. So I'm excited to be on with them. And currently just doing a lot of educational work around the country, a lot of clinics, a lot of guest conducting, and also music ensemble coordinator for the Blue Devil Drum and Bugle Corps. Thanks for having me, everybody.
Wonderful. You continue to give back in so many ways, Richard, and you've always been such a support to me in a lot of ways that you didn't even know. You cheered on my band parents on the sideline, and you helped me through this fall as I started judging as well. So we appreciate you being here. And tonight I'm a little disappointed we're not wearing our cowboy hats and have our boots on from Murray, Kentucky, our Class A champions for Grand Nationals. Both of the directors are here with us to talk a little bit of a different perspective from a different part of the country and a different sized band. Tim, tell us about yourself, and then Beth. Welcome.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having us. My name's Tim Zeiss. I'm the head band director at Murray High School in Murray, Kentucky. This is my 12th year at the school, and previously I got to teach my first 2 years teaching in Jackson, Tennessee at Southside High School. And so that's where I really got my feet wet, and been at Murray ever since. And unlike Joni that has 300 or so, that's awesome. We usually have about 90. That's been our biggest group that we've had. And our school district is a very small school district with about 470 students total at the high school. So that's just got a quick snapshot of Murray High School.
Oh, thanks for being with us. I think you and Beth are at district band auditions tonight, right, Beth?
You're not supposed to say
Right.
that, Susan.
Oh, sorry. Oh, that's right. You're on a webinar tonight.
That's okay, and I think my principal is watching, so he knew this was going to happen. But my name is Beth Stribling, and I taught for 4 years in Henderson, Kentucky, and then I am in my 35th year at Murray.
Wow.
Love it there. It's great. I'm in charge of the middle school band, and then I assist at the high school. And Tim and I are very, very lucky that we've got a very supportive school district, even though we're very small. And the fact that our administrators firmly believe in the importance of us being able to team teach all the band classes together. So we get to separate however we need, who needs help here and there. And it's really awesome. In our middle school is grades 4 through 8 together. And we've got a little over 700 in the middle school.
Wow. Well, to all of our panelists, thank you so much for joining us tonight. When we were talking about what session needed to be next, we know we got a lot of young teachers out there. We've got some first year teachers, and we've got that 1 through 5 year that maybe have mentors. But one of the greatest successes I think that young teachers have is how they handle competition, how they portray that philosophy of their philosophy of competition and teaching to their students. It shows up in why the students are there and what it is that they're there every day to do and why they go to performances to compete. And so when we came up with this competition, it's value beyond a tenth, because we hear all the time as judges, the value of a tenth, the value of a tenth. And my perspective on that is the value of a tenth doesn't matter if we're not here. If we run kids out because of competition, if it's a negative experience for them or their parents or the community, or if they're only there to win and winning doesn't happen every time, they're gone again. So I really want to kind of dive into this really hard. It's going to get a little Dr. Phil on everybody because there's going to be a lot of philosophy thrown around here, but we have the panel of people that teach from the heart. As my friend, Mr. Saucedo says, teaches with the goosebumps, which I love that. And so we're going to come out from that point of that philosophy tonight. One of the first things I'd like to just ask, any one of the panelists is, take a moment in your career. We've snapshotted our career, how long we've been teaching, but can you think of a time where competition either played a positive or a negative role in your band program? And we've all had those, but Richard, I'm going to start with you simply because I know you were at Carmel forever and you're retired now, and I think sometimes perspective is a powerful thing. So can you think of a time?
Yes, David, I can. And I try not to think of it very often, but it was at, I believe it was at the University of Cincinnati, if I'm remembering correctly. It was a BOA regional and one of the first ones that Carmel ever attended. We did not make finals. And it was at that point that I kind of realized, because I had always used our competitions as an assessment, not just of the band, but of myself. And we did not do very well. And I remember being so disappointed that I didn't talk to anybody on the way home. It was about a 2.5-hour ride home. I just could not talk to anyone. I was so upset. I got home, and you've always heard people talk about that look in the mirror moment. Well, I had one of those when I got home. I looked in the mirror and I said, you know what? You don't know what you're doing. And if you don't figure this out, and if you're not going to ask for help and get things right for your kids, then you need to get out of teaching. I looked at myself in the mirror and said that. The next day, I started calling people. And I was amazed at how the bigger the people were in our activity, the more they were willing to help. And that's when my career really started. But it did start with kind of a negative. And even though it sounds negative, I have Music for All to thank for that, because I realized where I was and what I needed to do.
Well, and I'll briefly share this because I want to pass off to someone else. But when I was the founding director at Kennesaw Mountain, and we opened in 2000, and we had a very fast start to our history. And of the first 5 years, we were at Grand Nationals 02, 03, 04. And I started to feel heat from parents going, we've got to go every single year. Well, we knew our budget couldn't stand that. And so 05, I just pulled the plug. It's the largest the band was ever going to, or had been to that point. It was 260. And I pulled the plug on every single competition for the entire year. We marched in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade that year. We played one exhibition before the Atlanta Regional in the Georgia Dome at BOA, but not one score, not one rating for an entire year. And I did exactly what Richard said. I put my philosophy to the test. Would my program survive? And 06, we went back. That was also a Midwest year. I have Richard to thank for writing a beautiful original work for that. But it put everything in perspective for me, is you don't necessarily have to lean on it, even though it feels like you do. So I appreciate you sharing that, Richard. Tim, let's talk a little bit about your program. And you shared something with me pre-show that I'd like for you to share, maybe with the audience, about the history of the school at Grand Nationals, and maybe what are your defining moments as far as competition?
Well, so Murray High School has a pretty rich tradition. In 1977, the high school won, Murray High School won the overall Grand National Championship. The band was much larger at the time, over a couple hundred. And we see that banner every day in our band room. Like it's a really cool homage to that band and just the history there. They've been in the Macy's in the 80s, and a lot of history with the program. So as a young director coming in, I think it was my third year overall teaching, and was very nervous, quite honestly, because it was a band that had made state finals every year, and the pressure was really hot. And I felt like, for me, it was like, if we don't make state finals, I'm going to get fired. Like, that was like it. So I know, as Richard was just saying about, for me early on in my teaching career, the pressure was really high, and I was focused in the wrong direction, pushing maybe in the wrong ways, the competitive side, and it wasn't until 2016 was kind of that aha moment for us. We went to a BOA, I'm sorry, not BOA event. We did, but it's state finals. And we had a great band that year. We were first in semifinals. Then granted, in Kentucky, 1986 was the first state championship. So our school had never won one. And so we were doing really well. And then we were first in semifinals. And then at finals, we dropped to third by quite a bit of margin. And that was a real great moment for us, in the sense of it was a very long bus ride home. And it was a very deflated group. However, we really used that as a step back and said, hey, this is a real life teaching moment, and how you can do a couple things here, right? You can quit and get in the shell and whine about it, or you can take the comments and be constructive and turn it for the better. And at that point, and I attribute this a lot to my students at the seniors, and we had a powwow, and got together and really shifted our mindset, because we did get to go to BOA the following super regional the following week, and we actually won our class. And that was kind of our first dive into BOA since I've been at Murray anyway, with the super regional. But from that point on, our philosophy was like, and we never talk about competition other than us. Like, that's kind of been a big one. Like, we don't talk about any other group, except for sometimes we'll highlight, like, this group is so good, you need to watch them, and but we never speak about other groups. We always say our motto is Semper Mulier, which is always better. And so we are only worried about trying to strive for excellence, and that's something that success is never an accident, and we tell them every day that, and it has to be intentional, and the work has to be there, and big things, little things become big things, and you saw that this year with the Grand Nationals. We were fortunate to win the class in BOA, and the whole spin of that was just supposed to be a fun trip and go see great bands. And I'm telling you, the highlight, winning was great, guys, but the highlight for me, and I'm maybe spinning this, but was what our kids got to see. We got to go back and watch a block of bands, and the first group we saw was Wando, and then we saw the next group and the next group and the next group, and they were just blown away. And that was like watching their reaction. That was just amazing. Just amazing.
Well, Joni, I'm gonna toss to you because you're in what is considered the Texas competitive country, and one of the reasons you're on here tonight is because I know your philosophy of competition. I know how your kids react to you. I've had former students that have student taught with you. I know how healthy your program is. Can you give us a little insight on, as great as the Woodlands program is and how well known that program is, how do your kids handle competition? I think you're muted, Joni. There we go.
I knew I was going to do that. It's kind of been an ebb and flow over the years, to be honest. I mean, you asked earlier about positive and negative effects of competition, and you just asked, how do my kids handle it? Looking back on things, when the Woodlands has, been really strong for a very long time before I even got there. And whenever I was given the head director position, I had some really big shoes to fill. And so my first 4 years, it was actually a really quick trajectory, the first 4 years. And then 2013 was year 4, when it's 4 years of the same staff, 4 years freshmen through seniors. And that senior class just killed it. And we had lightning in a bottle that year. And I say that winning the Grand Nationals is the best and worst thing that ever happened to our program, because who doesn't want to win Grand Nationals? I mean, it was unbelievable. It was amazing. And so many things went into that, from, former directors and all the alumni. And it was just wonderful to get to see that happen to the program. And the kids, they earned it. I mean, they really went after it that year, and they earned it. And so then at the end of that year, coincidentally, I had some staff members, like, a wife got transferred, job got transferred to another part of the country. Another of my directors wanted to move down to the middle school level. And, just some things happened after that year. Coincidentally, I lost that senior class and got an entirely new staff, guard director, 2 new assistants that next year. So here we are, the reigning, Grand National champion, and it's virtually a new staff and a very, very different set of kids. And there's high expectations. And, it was a very tumultuous year or two trying to come back from that, because, you have a bunch of kids that saw this really quick success. And then, if they're not all here correctly, there's an entitlement thing that starts to happen there, and think, oh, this is just supposed to happen because these past 4 years have done this, right? So we've hit the top. So now it's just going to stay there, right? And so it was we had to I teach the kids, I guess, and redo the culture around healthy competition, because going into that win, it was not about winning. It was just like, let's keep getting better. Let's keep, driving. And then after, you have to kind of, have conversations about what is winning, and is it the end all be all, and how do you, strive to be your best and one up yourself, but know that, competition is something that you can't control. And so it took a few years to kind of, I think, get it all back to the right mindset. Part of that was like staffing changes and just inconsistencies, that they didn't have. And these past few years, I think, going along with shows, and I think this is a later topic in our discussion, trying to do shows that kids are just going to enjoy doing and want to do really well no matter what. This is fun. I have fun doing this. If we can be really great competitively, that's awesome. And, they've turned the corner in these last few years. Like this year's senior class was the first group of kids that weren't in the shadow of that Grand Nationals group. So there were about 3 or 4 years there where I had groups of kids that looked at that trophy and they thought, okay, well, if we're not that, then we're no good, or we're living in that shadow and nothing can compare to 2013. Like they felt that all the time. And so those 3 or 4 years, we kind of had to just, kind of stay the course and persevere and just try to teach them the right things and a healthy mindset with it. But it was interesting because it was the best thing and it was kind of the worst thing too. And so that's been a journey, to be honest, because these last 4 years, like I said, have been the 4 years out of that shadow. And this is the best senior class that we've had. And interestingly enough, it's the most competitively well done group that we've had, because those kids didn't have put that same kind of pressure on themselves, So it's kind of a long-winded answer, but it was interesting to start looking back and kind of looking at how one thing led to the next. And it takes a while to get some of those things out of your system if, a big thing happens like that. So I'm glad to say that we're back in a good place.
Good thing. That's a great thing. Well, thank you for sharing that. I'm going to toss to Richard because he wears a lot of hats. Susan's already said that. He doesn't have any on tonight, but he wears a lot of hats. He was a very, very successful band director. He's an incredible composer. And now he's been handed the reins this fall as the chief judge for Bands of America. Susan and I both judge for Bands of America, and we know the work that goes into that job, but he's got kind of an interesting perspective, not only having done the teaching classroom side of things, but now training judges and being able to see through his eyes what is healthy competition, what is his philosophy and how he wants that to work. And I have to tip my hat to him because coming out of a pandemic and how smoothly things went this year, just great job, my friend. It's you did a great job, and I'm not surprised at all. So maybe Richard, talk a little bit about the why of competition. Like, what is your personal philosophy, what it was as a teacher, and now on the other side that you're having to steer judges into making sure they're seeing educationally through your eyes?
Yeah, thanks, David. I appreciate the nice comments. I continue to learn a lot and learned a ton this fall working with our great judges. We have so many great people on our roster. And, the bands, we didn't know what to expect, to be honest, coming out of the pandemic. But I'll tell you what, we were blown away, absolutely blown away at what the kids were doing, what the teachers had done, even those programs that have been almost completely shut down. So we were blown away by that. So to me, competition obviously can be a two-headed monster, but I do think it really depends on the person in front of the group. Mm-hmm. I think it's that simple. You can use competition. We never talked about it at Carmel. We never even mentioned it. All we talked about was excellence. We had a little banner up in front of our band room that just said, excellence is a lifestyle. And that's what we stuck to, and sometimes we would win and we'd look at the band and we'd say, what was our grade today? And they'd go, oh, C minus. I'm like, wait a minute, but didn't we finish first? They're like, C minus, and then there would be other times that we wouldn't do well and they'd be like, okay, I think it was maybe B plus. We're almost there, and that's how we kind of approached it. We tried to get them to understand that everyone's working as hard as they are, and I'll still remember a couple of our coaches at Carmel High School giving me a lot of crap because they would go to competitions and they'd see us cheering on other bands. And they're like, Richard, you don't do that in competition. And I'm like, well, in our activity, yes, we actually do. So that's kind of how I looked at that. From a judging perspective, and I've learned so much from our great friend Gary Markham on this, but it really is about education. And we're going to continue to get better in the judging community here at Music for All. And I think they're already great, but we still have room to grow. But it's about us passing on information that is going to empower those teachers, empower the students, the staff, etc. It's not about a number. It's not about a placing. And the proof of that is simply to look at some of the small bands, and I remember a couple of them that only had like 20 members in their band, 25 members in their band that came to Grand Nationals. You know, they didn't come to make semifinals. They didn't come to make finals. They came for the experience and they came to learn. And to me, that's the healthiest way to look at competition. I hope that all made sense. I know I went through that kind of quick.
No, I think it's great, and you were around directors, you're around students and parents this year. Can you talk about the climate around competition this year? Did you feel like, I'm going to relate this to the DCI season because, let's face it, no numbers or no judges this past summer, and the fan base is like, don't need them. Get them out of here. We just want to be entertained, and did you feel a sense of we're just glad to be back from people this fall?
So many tears. That's the only way I can tell you. First show that I was on as chief judge was in southern part of Texas, and that first band came on, and I swear half the panel was in tears. There was a time, I want to say 2 or 3 weekends later, Marie Chapinski and I were on the same panel, and a group came across, and they were just absolutely beautiful in the way they presented. And I had to walk out because I had tears in my eyes. And Marie comes out, and she has tears in her eyes, and she's like, "You too?" And I'm like, "Absolutely." So that kind of sums up what it was like, David. It was amazing. It was just amazing to be back and see those kids, see what the directors had done.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Susan?
I couldn't find my unmute button there, Joni. Oh my goodness. It's funny how we're all talking about philosophy. We all fight writing a philosophy when we're in our music ed undergrad days, right? But that's what it comes back to. This is another Richard Saucedo story. I remember watching the year you guys won with the Beatles show, and there was a student that had a physical disability in the band. And you never talked about it, never pointed out. But to me at that moment, I was like, if at the highest levels, your philosophy says anybody that wants to be in band can be in band, that's what's important. And you and I have never talked about that. I never said that to you, but that hit me at that moment. That helped me change my philosophy that anybody who could walk or talk or had a heartbeat come into the band room should be in the band is part of that philosophy. So thank you for that.
I appreciate you saying that. And I'll just let everyone know that young man is Kyle Steck, who is now a doctor of saxophone from University of North Texas.
Oh, really?
I always think about what if someone cared so much about placings that they wouldn't let that kid go out there. And I just encourage everyone to just look at what the kids need. The competition will take care of itself. It really will.
Absolutely. Well, Beth, I want to ask you, we didn't get a chance to ask you a little bit earlier. I have 2 questions for you. First of all, you mentioned earlier that you've been teaching for a little bit. And I assume that especially in a state commonwealth like Kentucky, that you've seen a lot of competition. How has it kind of changed? Do you feel like things have changed in terms of the approach from teachers? Is it healthier now? Is it different? Where do you think things are right now?
Whoa.
Not to sidestep you.
Yeah, judge the whole state. I am originally from Middle Tennessee. And so that competition reigns hard. I mean, marching band is definitely a sport in Middle Tennessee. I mean, it really is. And so from the moment that I went to my first contest of champions there at MTSU, I wanted to teach in Kentucky, not Tennessee, just because of the quality of band. So my dream came true, and I've taught all my years in Kentucky. I will say that to answer your question, I still see a lot of what I feel like is really unhealthy competition with some directors. You still have the directors that back in the old days when we had cassette tapes, and you were listening to the cassette tape on your way home from the contest, and you disagreed with the judge and you rolled down the window and you threw the tape out. I can remember driving back from contests and just seeing cassette tape going down the side of the road. And I could try and guess which band director that came from that was going home the same way we were. But, you know, in Kentucky, we have started having more people go non-competitive. Several really high quality band programs have gone on competitive just because they felt like the competition wasn't healthy. So, you know, I think you just have to look at the program. I do think that there are some very high quality bands that are working hard to, or band directors of high quality programs who are trying to help shift the philosophy with directors, especially young directors, with some of the PDs that they plan and different things like that. But I'll say that my philosophy of competition really changed when I got to Murray, because at Anderson it was very, very competitive. But you know, when I got to Murray and saw that sign on the wall that said Semper Melior, that just really clicked with me. That it's, you know, your individual competition. And then as time went on with directors, it was more of we need to listen to the comments and worry less about the numbers. Interesting, kind of playing off something with Joni. So I started at Murray in 1987, 10 years after they had won the national championship. And still around the community, that's what they talked about 10 years after that. And so people would come and introduce themselves to me and say, my child was in the 77 band, or I marched in the band that won the national championship. And so with the band community, that was really big. With the other people in the community, it wasn't. We were very, there were very hard feelings with the athletics. The superintendent that hired me put his finger in my face and said, and I'm just letting you know that in this school district, the tail no longer wags the dog. In the time between, I would say 1979, 1980, until I was hired, for that length of time, they lost at least one band director per year, except one year when they lost both directors, because the pressure from the community was so strong, both to be competitive and the negative feelings toward it. So it took a long time for us to build this culture back of, it's about the real product is the individual student's growth, and not a number, and not how you measure yourself against somebody else. I remember when D. Bishop was doing his interview for the position at Murray High School, and one of the students asked him, is it more important to you to have fun or to be good? And Dee said, I think it's always fun to be good.
Yep.
And that really helped the momentum, that kind of philosophy, and building that with the students. We're going to have fun while we're being good. And excellence became the goal again.
And I think Richard said something that I'm going to go back to, because we have, as teachers, we have to be the greatest example for not only our kids, but our parents. We have to show them that competition doesn't matter. one of the things that when Richard's band would come to the Atlanta regional, we had sleepovers at Kennesaw Mountain High School at my school. So there's Carmel and Kennesaw Mountain having this sleepover, and then we go and compete the next day, and we're cheering for each other. Every year we went to Grand Nationals, the first stop was to go have dinner with the Carmel band, and then we rehearsed in their stadium after we watched their rehearsal, and we cheered for their rehearsal, and then they stayed and watched our rehearsal. So I think we can be our greatest advocate for competition really doesn't matter if we show that ourselves, and not just talk about it, but show it. Play a national anthem with a visiting band one night. That might be one of your greatest rivals, but put the bands together and play the national anthem and intersperse the uniforms, every other uniform. It'll make the community crazy, but you know you're doing it for the right reason. Joni, you had something?
There we go. Yeah, a couple things actually. You just, brought up some things in my mind about, how you can foster a much healthier competition relationship amongst groups and even amongst parents by just trying to get another group involved with yours somehow. For instance, like Jarrett Lippman from Claudia Taylor, like he and I became really good friends back in 2014 when they came to Houston for our BOA regional, and I happened to, catch a conversation from saying, they needed a place to rehearse. And I was like, well, come to the Woodlands, come and use our parking lot. And our kids, and we were competitors, and our kids got to see two directors working together that are competitors. And those kids got to know each other and learned we're the same person. We're the same kind of people here, and Claudia Taylor won the contest that night, the year after we won the contest. And I took my kids up into the stands to watch them do their encore performance. And my kids just went nuts for them. And I think a lot of that was because they got to know them and they realized like, hey, yeah, this is my competition. They just beat us, but they're so cool because they do what we do and they love what they do just like we do. And ever since then, our two schools have had a really healthy competitive relationship because the kids from that group would tell the kids the next year about it. And so there's been this ongoing like CTJ Woodlands kind of love fest that's gone back and forth, which is really cool. But then from the parent standpoint, I saw this happen more this year than I think I ever have before. Whenever there's a nationals year, well, like you said, Texas bands, it is competitive country down here. And oh man. So when all those bands went to Grand Nationals this year, the Team Texas Facebook, was created. And I saw parents from all of the schools go onto that Facebook page and do nothing but encourage each other and support each other and root for each other. And it was so cool watching that happen, start back in the summer and see it happen over the course of the fall. And see those parents showing a healthy competitive relationship between each other too, which that's not normal down here. I'm just going to put that out there. And so it was really, really neat to see. And so there are ways, that you can foster that healthy mindset between your competitors just through, just making a decision to put yourself out there in a different way and bring others into your world. And I think once you do that, it really changes things, and that was just a really cool thing to see this past year. Wanted to share that.
Awesome. Well, Joni, as we'll kind of stay with you for just a little bit here. We all saw how COVID really affected things. It was a little different in Texas, obviously, than it was in Kentucky, and continuing to be at that level in terms of being competitive and also the design process. How did all the COVID stuff affect your rehearsal strategy? And also, I think that a lot of people aren't really aware of what happens with the 8 hour a week rule. Could you explain that a little bit in Texas?
Okay, I'll start with the 8 hour rule. So what that is that bands can rehearse for a total of 8 hours during the school week. So between Monday and the end of the school day on Friday, you're not allowed to rehearse more than 8 hours total. And then if you decide to add weekend rehearsals, you have to take away time from somewhere else in the week. So your 8 hours is total from Monday through Saturday, but you can't rehearse more than 8 hours during the actual school week in addition to that. And then you get a performance hour, like a warm-up hour for a competition. And that was created decades ago when I guess there were a few schools that were really going above and beyond what I think people thought was healthy because there wasn't any limitations. And then UIL came down hard with a very strict limitation, and it's been that way ever since. So we are forced to, it's very difficult. I will say this, especially when there's bad weather and things like that. It's very difficult because there's no wiggle room. But it forces us to be efficient and work incredibly fast and just always work like your pants are on fire. I mean, that's what I have to tell my kids. Like you have to work with a sense of urgency every time you're out here, because there is no 8-hour rehearsal this Saturday. You know, your 8 hours are spread out over 5 days, where there'd be plenty of other groups outside of Texas that would do 6-7 hours during the week, and they do 8 hours in the weekend. So it's good to the sense that it pushes us to be smart and efficient, but it is very limiting. Now, during COVID, the 8-hour rule did not go away. I want to say this too, because I know, there's two schools of thought, and then there's the gray area of, if you wanted to do marching band last year in the midst of all of that. And we were very fortunate to be able to have the opportunities that we had. I polled my parents to find out what they wanted before I pursued anything. And we were in a community that was like, we want our kids to be able to do something. We want our kids to have an experience. We want our kids to be able to do as much as they possibly can while still staying inside of, perimeters and limitations to keep them, from getting sick. And so I had 95% of my kids chose to do marching band, which is unbelievable. 90% of them came to in-person classes every day. And I know how lucky we are and how fortunate we are with that, because I don't know of any other group that had those kind of percentages of anybody that I've talked to. So I will always count our blessings and always consider us, incredibly fortunate to have a community and a superintendent and administration that would trust us to come up with a way to give these experiences to the kids. And so it wasn't without its difficulties. We definitely toned down the approach, to the show, and it simplified our approach a bit. Because, you don't know if you're going to be losing kids. You don't know if from 1 week to the next, you're going to have 30 holes. You don't know if you're going to have 30 holes at the competition. So one of the really interesting parts of the whole experience was counting our blessings every day, and trying to get the kids to realize, like, do you know what kind of a gift this is that you have right now? That there are so many other groups across the state and across the country who would give anything to have what you have. And this is a gift, and we need to be thankful for it every single day. And so it was a good reset from that standpoint too, to just, realize like how great this is. And so that was a big part of how we approached the season, because we didn't know if it was going to end in September. We didn't know if it was going to end in October. We had the state marching contest all the way in December, and we didn't know if we were going to even make it to December. So it was a pretty wild process of just doing it because it's something we want to do and because it gives us purpose, and the joy that we could bring to people at the games, giving them live music. those were just, I mean, I know the kids would have loved to have had other opportunities throughout that year, just like any high schooler, would want. Um, but the perspective was a lot different, I think, in a lot of different ways. It was really good. And even though there are limitations that we had to work through, it also taught us to come up with more creative ways to do things. And I think a lot of people will agree with this. There are a lot of things that we kept from how we did things during that COVID period, because some of those things actually worked better. They were more efficient and were more productive. And so even though we were working inside of a bunch of limitations that we weren't used to, we found that there are better ways to do things. And so it wasn't all for nothing. You come out with a lot of positives. You don't ever want to go through it again, but there were so many positives that we took away from that I will always be thankful for. And I don't know if I'm answering your question, but that's a little bit about whatever our experience was like. And I just know that we're so lucky that we had it. And obviously it helped us have a great year this year as well.
No, I think you more than answered it. One of the things that I would like to discuss as far as competition, there's especially for young teachers, the amount of notes you play, the difficulty of the show equals I'm going to win the show. And we are now seeing people prove, my good friend Alfred Watkins calls it the KISS concept, is keep it simple, stupid. And I think that, for me, a melody, thanks to Richard Saucedo, was always really successful. Recognizable music, accessibility. And I used to tell my design team, and when I put shows together for other schools, let the audience in past the front sideline. They shouldn't be in a cage looking at the show like you're an aquarium someplace and you're standing and watching the fish and you can't get in there. Your shows have always felt very accessible. They're entertaining, they're melodious, they're visual. It's all the things that general effect is, as far as the emotional, the aesthetic, and the intellectual. How do you go about that? Like when somebody sees your show from this past year and they go, man, the kids look like they're having fun, because they are. So talk about that a little bit, Joni, as far as your design and when you think about the product over the number, because you've proven, like so many have, that the number will take care of itself if the product's accessible.
Sure. So I did come to a point with our designers, basically like the years 14, 15, 16, 17, 14, 15. It was right after that trains year that was just so, keep it simple, stupid. Like, how can you miss this? After that year, you have such creative people that they kind of like to get really cerebral sometimes. And so we had a couple of years there that were very artsy fartsy, and kind of, it's like, oh, that's cool if you get what you're doing, but to the average person in the audience, that means nothing, and it's confusing, so you can have an appreciation for art, and then there's art that everybody can really appreciate and understand and get, and then there's art that not everybody's going to understand, right? And so when we got into 2016, that was when I was in one of our design meetings and said, yeah, we got to just keep it simple. We've got to do something that the kids are going to get, they're going to understand, that they're going to buy into, and that our audience members can understand and relate to, and not feel dumb when they watch it because they don't understand it, right? So that's when we did the On the Waterfront year, and it was a show about water, and you kind of fancy it up a little bit, and the kids got it, and they understood, like, okay, this is not something far-fetched. I can buy into this. I know how to communicate this. And same thing in 2019 is when we decided to do the On the Town. And it was a pretty bold move because we knew it was going to be a little bit more of a theatrical approach, and the costuming, and that's when we went all white into the sailors. And it was kind of in that time where people were flirting, like the high school community was flirting with the costume change stuff. Drum corps had already kind of gone in there, but the high schools hadn't really gone there yet. And so during those design meetings, bringing up this and that, I was like, let's do it. It scared me so much, but I was like, let's do it because this will be fun. It'll be different. And we ended up having to really teach the kids how to become a different kind of performer through that. Because all of a sudden you take off your marching uniform and you take off your shako and there's this person underneath, right? And so we had great music, we had great set, great costuming, but now how do they become the character, of what that show embodies? So we had great music, and now it's like, okay, how can we bring this to life? And I think giving the kids, they really fell in love with that show, and audiences did too, because they got to see a persona come out of it, and they got to see different personalities come out of it. And our group really matured a lot as performers that year because we had to pull them out of that comfort zone, right? And teach them how to become something completely different. There's kind of like the business side of the performance, and then there's the theatrical side of the performance. And sometimes you have to do both, and sometimes you have to separate them. And so that was a real big learning experience for them. And I mean, people loved that show, and it was something completely different. And so last year, we decided to kind of stay in that same realm with the West Side Story. COVID brought everything, way down from a production standpoint and from a difficulty standpoint and everything like that. But it was in that same vein of, here's some really great music that a lot of people know. And even if they don't know it, they're still going to love it because it's a great melody, and kind of keeping them in that same theatrical mindset. So going into this past year, we wanted to build off of all of that and continue with it. And so you said earlier, people say, oh, it looks like they're having so much fun. And they are, but it's so hard at the same time, so they're working their butts off underneath that. So when I hear people say they look like they're having so much fun, that makes me feel good, because that the work that they're putting into it, they're feeling all of that effort come back out, in a really positive way. And audiences really received that. And so we've been memorable, and it's great to win contests, but when you're memorable and when people go, that Sailor show, or that Chicago show or that West Side Story show, like, that you're leaving a really great impression on people, and you're reaching them in a very different way than maybe some of your more competitive shows have done before. So it's always kind of a give and take and what you want to, put your emphasis on, but it's been really fun. And, I've really enjoyed that approach that we've taken the last few years.
Do we dare say that pageantry could be entertaining?
I know, right?
Well,
it's been fun.
And
Should we do that?
That's what we also saw with our Class A champions from Murray, right? You guys had a lot of buy-in. I've always said, because I've only ever been in small bands except for college, and I've only ever taught small bands. I'm really, a force behind the cheering for small bands. But I've always felt like we've had license to be able to do a little bit more in some ways than the big bands, that they had kind of a compulsory list that they had to do. And we could be creative in that way. And tell us a little bit about what happened at Murray this year with this fall show, and how that really spoke to the culture of the community, and how the students really rallied as well, with some of the things that Joni was talking about, the performance aspect.
It's so funny because Joni was saying about all these things about, student being the performer and this character and entertainment. And so in this keep it simple, that's exactly when we knew designing this past year's show. It was called Ecstasy of Gold. And we just kept it really simple. We're stealing gold off a train. The end. Like that was it in a synopsis, right? But like when we were doing this, we're like, we're not going to do this like kind of hokey, cheesy Western, right? We want to get this character of outlaws and this gritty persona. And the students bought into that from like day one. They were like, we get to wear cowboy hats? Like, yeah, absolutely, yes. So we kind of went in that aspect. And what's great, it was accessible in the sense with the music of, the Ecstasy of Gold being some, and we used some samples to highlight our soloist, and our ballad was an Elton John song, "Have Mercy on the Criminal," and we had a phenomenal trombone player in that ballad, and things just really jived. We had a cool fight scene on the trains, and
With two girls, right? Two girls.
What's so cool about this is that the girls that were the fighters, we were finally duking it out to fight for the gold. They did all the choreography. So we're setting drill, and I'm saying, you guys go take care of that, and we'll just give you suggestions, right? And so one was so completely type A, and she's like, tell me everything. I'm like, no, figure it out. Go watch a bar fight on YouTube or something, And they choreographed that whole thing, and it was just really cool. And they had some suggestions, we gave some tweaks. But so anyway, going back to that was when we design our shows, it's all about student and buy-in. So it's like whatever what will they enjoy to perform? And I think with this year was probably the least thoughtful design in the sense of we'll still gold off a train. The end. And we picked a show, our school colors are black and gold. So when we were doing this for 2020 designing, we were like, okay, so in case things get shut down, what can we use that we haven't in our banner? So black and gold was the theme, gold trains, and it just kind of went from there, because last year we didn't get to compete. The whole state shut down the competitive side. And even before that happened, Stribling and I, we decided that for us to have a future Tiger Band, financially, we had to pull back and say, before the state decided to do it, we made the decision, we're not going to compete this year. And it was really one of the most daunting decisions, and it was really painful, but it was the right move. And then the state ended up doing it anyway. But for us to have a future edition and be financially responsible, that's the choice we made. And we still did a fun, non-competitive show. It was a complete 180 from what we've been doing. And for marching band, for us, it's not mandatory. It's completely extracurricular if they want to do it. And we have a high percentage that participates. And so we did this fun, entertaining show last year. And luckily we got to play, I think, one time at a football game. Right? It was our one performance of the year. Because Kentucky schools, for the most part, a big portion was virtual. We were virtual. When we were back in person, there was an option for virtual and in person. So I know for the high school and even middle school, we were teaching half our band classes online. And so I had 2 split band classes, and then a computer beside me with the others who were online. And, at least they're kind of there, So last year, in a nutshell, was to come out of this the way we did was, if you told me this now, what would happen a year ago, there's no way, right? But the students are resilient. I think they were ready to jump in after not doing. There was some of that attrition of after a year of almost where nothing happened, to kind of get them back and going again. There was a little bit of that, right? But once they got in, boy, they jumped head in, and they didn't know any different, right? So they were just ready to go. And for us, we had 51 of our 90 kids. I call them rookies because they didn't compete the year before. So we had 51 new kids who really had no idea what was going on. And but that was almost great because they just kind of followed, and they were coachable, and that our seniors were amazing in this process because they stuck it through. And where a lot of people would drop out, and from my perspective, for younger teachers watching this, and and this is any program, if you get your older kids on board and for them to have some direction and say about some of the processes, what's important to them, and then they kind of decide that stuff, they'll police it, and then they'll make it a thing. And then it just progresses, and the young guys are going to just look at it and say, hey, that's just the way we do it, or they'll take more ownership. And I think our current senior group is just phenomenal, and I love them so much. And anyway, they're the big reason of our success this year, no doubt.
It's awesome about talking to both programs. Sorry, Richard. I mean, you're important too, but for everybody to see, because we think of the Woodlands and a large Texas band, it can only be that. But to see a band from Murray, from the size school it is, really grasp the focus of everyone across the country and within your community to convince kids that everybody can do this. It doesn't really matter the size, the money, the, where it is. It's just buy-in is what I'm hearing from everybody, pretty much. It's buy-in and community support, and that the kids are really a reflection of the director and what that philosophy is. We could talk about this for a couple more hours, couldn't we, David?
I think we could.
Especially with this crew.
Yeah, it's everything we wanted this to be. And I would just say, to any young teacher that's out there, Richard kind of hit on this, but find yourself a mentor. Those people are the ones that can say, yep, you're going down the pathway that I did. Let me get you back in the road. And we all had those people. Gary Markham was mine. And I can tell you that there's so many times that I would come off the track and he would just look at me and go, nope, that's not it. And you got to have that person to nudge you back. It may not feel like the right decision at the time, but just like Tim said, a year ago, he and Beth weren't the Class A champions for Bands of America because their kids were all in little computer box. So never say never, and always readdress your philosophies. Always check it. I still have my philosophy, by the way, Susan, that I wrote in my MU 101 class about what I think music education should be. And I will not tell anybody what it says because it is nowhere close to what it should have been. But
I want to read it.
Yeah, I'll find that sometime and show it to you. Well, at Music for All, our mission is to create, provide, and expand positively life-changing experiences through Music for All. Our vision is to be a catalyst to ensure that every child across America has access and opportunity to participate in active music making in his or her scholastic musical environment. I think we proved that tonight by looking at Murray and looking at the Woodlands. We're all doing it, and we're all doing it at a really high level. I want to thank our guests, Joni Perez, Richard Saucedo, Beth Stribling, and Tim Zeiss for being a part of this tonight. You guys have just been absolutely wonderful. We'd like to also thank our national presenting sponsor, the Yamaha Corporation of America. Woo! Because without them, we couldn't do any of this stuff. Be sure to check out the Yamaha Educational Suite at yamahaeducatorsuite.com. And before we sign off, it's been 22 months since we were able to do anything with any sort of marching band championship. And tonight, talking about competition, I'm just glad that we can look back on a competitive season that we actually had one this year. So after 22 months of not being able to do it, the little record that we found, ticket sales, merch sales, at an all-time high this fall, which tells us that our fan base wants to see this, our kids want to see it, our parents want to see it. So we want to thank all of our dedicated donors for their continued support and generosity, which helps sustain Music for All through this pandemic, such as these things that you're seeing tonight. Mind the Gap was initiated because there were student teachers that never got to student teach. There were student teachers that came out of 1 month of student teaching, and then they started applying for jobs. We felt the need to find the gap and how we could fill that. So thanks to Yamaha, thanks for Music for All, for having trust in Susan and myself to be able to train the next wave of successful music educators.
And the hard work of recovery and rebuilding isn't done. If you've enjoyed this episode and for us to continue to provide our free educational resources and advocacy materials, please consider a donation to Music for All in any amount. Your gift allows us to serve our mission with future educational programming such as this webinar. Please feel free to visit. And today is Giving Tuesday, right? It's the time to do it. musicforall.org/give to help Music for All thrive and provide positively life-changing experiences for many years to come, becoming a donor today. And finally, please, as David said, remember we also have Mind the Gap and our Teaching Social Emotional Learning Through Music series available as audio podcasts as well. So please make sure that you subscribe so you don't miss a thing. David may have mentioned before, but we're hoping in the coming weeks at the Midwest to have a live program there for you. And we'll give you more information about that coming soon. And hopefully you'll be able to come by and see us there at Music for All. But for tonight, for Music for All, I'm Susan Smith.
I am David Starnes.
Thank you all for being with us. Thanks, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Have a great holiday. Take care.
Bye-bye.